Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG show. Thought I'd start off today talking about Portland, Oregon. Once quiet and a beautiful city in the western part of the United States, which has become what? A synonym for the collapse of public authority in America. Let's see, from the Associated Press. The mayor of Portland, Oregon, and President Donald Trump engaged in a real-time argument Sunday as the president sent a flurry of critical tweets about Ted Wheeler as the mayor was holding a press conference about the fatal shooting of a right-wing supporter in his city the night before. Yes, it's really significant to let us know that the dead man was a right-wing supporter. Of course, the suggestion there, of course, is that he deserved it. After Trump called Wheeler a Democratic fool and blamed him for allowing violence to proliferate in the liberal city, the visibly angry mayor lashed out at the president, addressing him in the first person through the TV cameras. That's classic Trump. Mr. President, how can you think that a comment like that, if you're watching this, is in any way helpful? It's an aggressive stance. It is not collaborative. I certainly reached out, I believe, in a collaborative manner by saying earlier that you need to do your part and I need to do my part, and then we both need to be held accountable. Let's work together. Wouldn't that be a message? Donald Trump and Ted Wheeler working together to help move this country forward. Why don't we try that for a change? The testy news conference followed a chaotic and volatile 24 hours in Portland that began when a caravan of about 600 vehicles packed with Trump supporters drove through Portland and was met with counter-protesters. Skirmishes broke out between the groups, and about 15 minutes after the caravan left the city, a supporter of the right-wing group Patriot Prayer was fatally shot. Patriot Prayer founder Joey Gibson identified the victim as Aaron J. Danielson. He called the victim a good friend, but provided no further details. Danielson apparently also went under the name Jay Bishop, according to Patriot Prayer's Facebook page. It wasn't clear if the shooting was related to the clashes between Trump supporters and counter-protesters in Portland, which has become a flashpoint in the national Black Lives Matter protests since George Floyd was killed in May, an increasing centerpiece in Trump's law and order re-election campaign theme. Protests. That's what they are. Oh, Portland has seen nearly 100 consecutive nights of Black Lives Matter protests, and many have ended with vandalism to federal and city property, including police precincts, a county jail, the federal courthouse, and city hall. In July, Trump sent more than 100 federal agents from the U.S. Department of Homeland Security to safeguard federal property, a move that instead reinvigorated the protests. Yeah, I guess it was just an accident that a Trump supporter was shot dead. Execution style is the phrase I keep hearing in the streets of Portland. Not enough collaboration going on, I see. This is from the Oregonian Portland Police Chief Chuck Lavelle. President Donald Trump and Governor Kate Brown react to killing of man near downtown protests. He tried mixing with the agitators and anarchists, and they mocked him, Trump tweeted of Wheeler. He would like to blame me and the federal government for going in, but he hasn't seen anything yet. We have only been there with a small group to defend our U.S. courthouse because he couldn't do it. And Joe Biden weighed in. The deadly violence we saw overnight in Portland is unacceptable. Shooting in the streets of a great American city is unacceptable. I condemn violence of every kind by anyone, whether on the left or the right, and I challenge Donald Trump to do the same. Yes, I guess Biden's campaign is panicking because he had nothing to say about this anarchy on the streets for months, except to, reiterate his support for Black Lives Matter and invoke the sacred memory of George Floyd. I don't know whether you've seen this. It's already gone viral that it's been decided that Joe is going to have to campaign because people were saying, wait, why is Kamala Harris responding to Trump's renomination. Where's Joe? Is he still hiding in the basement? So they filled Joe full of whatever it takes to get him on the move. And he was trying to bash Trump for his response to COVID-19. And what he wanted to say is that more people have died in this epidemic than in any epidemic in America for 100 years. And he could not get it out. He just kept scrambling the parts, and finally, the dead. Yeah, okay. And then he sort of worked backwards. So you got what he wanted to say in pieces. But it's a, how should we say? It's a bad look. Man under investigation in fatal shooting of right-wing demonstrator. Again, right-wing demonstrator. Are the anarchists, Antifa, Black Bloc, BLM on the streets of Portland, are they referred to as left-wing? Shouldn't think so. I mean, how is that relevant? Michael Forrest Reinl, the 48-year-old man under investigation in the fatal shooting Saturday night of a right-wing demonstrator in downtown Portland, attended a Black Lives Matter protest the night before outside the mayor's home. Yeah, by the way, what I'd heard was that the mayor's neighborhood is under siege from demonstrators. The mayor conveniently was not there, but the rest of the people in the condo have made their lives made miserable. Reinl brought his daughter, who was carrying a baseball bat, according to photos by an Oregonian Oregon Live photographer and others present Friday night at Mayor Ted Wheeler's condominium building. Reinl was dressed in the same light-colored vest that videos and photos show him wearing at the scene of the deadly shooting about 9 p.m. Saturday. Sources familiar with the case but not authorized to speak said police are investigating Reinl in connection with the death of Aaron Danielson, a supporter of the right-wing group Patriot Prayer. Danielson was shot in the chest and died soon after most cars in a caravan of backers of President Donald Trump drove through downtown and left. A family member also identified Reinl as a man captured in photos and video leaving the shooting scene. Police have made no arrests in the shooting. I don't know whether that is still the case. The Friday night protest had the feeling of an evening block party with a DJ and other musicians playing in the street as people danced, while about a dozen demonstrators sat inside the lobby of Wheeler's residence in the Pearl District, locking arms with a list of demands for the city to address systemic police violence and racism. Yeah, it's what the family that riots together stays together. Reinl calls himself an anti-fascist and wrote in mid-June on his Instagram page, "I am 100% Antifa all the way. I'm willing to fight for my brothers and sisters." Now, this is curious because we've heard from no less than an authority than that fellow who used to be in Bruce Springsteen's band. He was on The Sopranos. He wears a do-rag around his head. That Antifa doesn't exist. This is a line that the media has been pushing strenuously for quite some time. There's no such thing as Antifa. Maybe it existed in the past, but no, it's long gone. I have my daughter here with me because I'm trying to give her an education, Reinl says in the video. He's posted videos and photos of demonstrations that he's attended in Portland since late June, accompanied by the hashtags Black Lives Matter, A New Nation, and Breonna Taylor. Here's what they call the money graph, which is buried in the middle of the story. Reinl was also accused of carrying a loaded gun at an earlier protest in Portland. He was cited around 2 a.m. on July the 5th, accused of illegally possessing a loaded gun in a public place, resisting arrest, and interfering with police in the 700 block of Southwest Main Street. The allegations were dropped on July 30th, and he spent no time in custody. He's wanted on a failure to appear warrant stemming from a June 8th Baker County arrest in a speed racing case that involved his 17-year-old son in Eastern Oregon. He faces allegations including driving under the influence of a controlled substance, recklessly endangering another, unlawful possession of a gun, and driving while suspended and uninsured. His daughter, then 11, was with him in his speeding Cadillac at the time. Yes, that's it's buried right at the bottom of the story. I suppose if this man had been, like, I'm trying to figure this out. So if this man had been actually prosecuted and punished for what he had done, then that fellow Jay would still be alive. But I guess the Oregonian doesn't want to go in that direction. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh, progressive community leaders call for Portland Mayor Police Chief to resign following deadly shooting. A group of leaders representing various progressive organizations from across the Portland area have called for the resignations of Mayor Ted Wheeler and Police Chief Chuck Lavelle. Bobin Singh, executive director of the Oregon Justice Resource Center, said the conditions leading up to the incident were predictable, citing various instances of clashes between right-wing protesters and counter-protesters over the years. So if we have right-wing protesters and counter-protesters, they would be left-wing, wouldn't they? These conditions have been created because there's a lack of leadership, a lack of vision, Singh said. We can no longer move forward with the current leadership that's in place in Portland. Well, the mayor made it clear how much he supported the anarchists, and for his pains, he was shouted down, insulted quite foully, and then had to run from tear gas. Very amusing that was. I don't think we can see what happened last night in a vacuum or as an isolated incident, said Olivia Catby Smith, co-chair of the Portland chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. People are going to be killed on both sides of this because of the environment Ted Wheeler has been making in the city. When the mayor was lashing out at Trump, he blamed Trump for everything that had happened in Portland. Apparently, Trump's personality is so malignant that it invades, I don't know, like a virus, the bodies of responsible people and turns them into anarchists trying to burn policemen alive in the federal building. Yes, the demand for Wheeler to resign was also echoed in a joint letter from the Oregon chapter of the Council on American Islamic Relations, the Oregon Justice Resource Center, the Portland Democratic Socialists of America Next Up Action Fund, Portland's Resistance, and Popular Mobilization, PDX. Let's see, this next thing is from today on Red State Nation. Portland rioter who killed Trump supporter and was celebrated by BLM is allegedly identified MSM. Silent. For a while, rumors were circulating online that a rioter had been killed by a supporter of Trump, but there was a big celebration when they found out it was actually the other way around. Everybody, I just got word. The person who died was a Patriot Prayer person, the Black Lives Matter leader tells the excited crowd. He was a fucking Nazi. Our community held its own and took out the trash. I'm not going to shed any tears over a Nazi dying. Well, how many people are they going to kill? If all Trump supporters are Nazis, well, there was something like 63 million of them who voted for him in 2016. Yes, the crowd laughs and cheered to this. Said Andy, no, the ID of the deceased is not confirmed. Well, it is now. The mainstream media was silent about these horrifying scenes. BLM rioters were celebrating, and they remained silent after 4chan users managed to identify the shooter. And 4chan, it would appear, is correct. What did this fellow do for a living? He seemed to be spending an awful lot of time in the streets of Portland. Dennis Dale was on the scene. Siege notes, August 31, murder LARPing. This is from dennisdale.wordpress.com. You like Trump? She sounded surprised. I had tried to give a discreet thumbs up, sitting on my bike at the curb, when she hoisted a Trump flag out the passenger window of a late model American car pulling up to a red light. She did this with the cheerful defiance of a high school prankster. Yeah, don't tell anybody, I said, indicating the downtown Portland setting around us, only half joking. She was a beauty, Blonde, broad-faced, offensively healthy and wholesome, her Nordic vigor and cheerful credulity, an anachronism here and now, her not yet defiled state, precarious though it may be for all young women this day and age, a source of immediate suspicion. Someone got shot here last night, she said, suddenly adopting the self-conscious seriousness of a child. Yeah, right there. I pointed to the spot, just the other side of the intersection where Aaron Danielson was executed the night before after a pro-Trump car caravan invaded downtown and set off the prickly rage that is now the city's defining feature beneath all the increasingly hollow counterculture posturing. Really, she said. The false aspect of her manner evaporated. Her expression was genuine surprise. She had had no idea. 3 or 4 people were sticking American flags in the dirt around a sidewalk tree where the Patriot collapsed face first in the street. A young man awkwardly climbed up to drape a flag from its branches. A camera crew, just 3 young people, one with a professional-grade video camera, waited on the other side of the street, ghouls like me, waiting for something to happen. Nothing did, thankfully. Later after sundown, I went back to look again. Fewer than were there before. U.S. flags stuck in the hard, dry dirt, woeful, and a fashioned cross lashed to a tree's trunk. No one was paying the place the least attention. Earlier, a 20-year-old man was arrested for assaulting a federal employee yesterday at the U.S. District Court. On August 24th, Dakota Curtis Means allegedly began following an employee around 5:30 a.m. while yelling obscenities. Court documents say he was carrying a black paintball rifle and told the employee it's a paintball gun now, but it's going to be an AR later. U.S. Marshal Service deputies arrested the 20-year-old a short time later. Means was charged with forcibly assaulting, impeding, and intimidating a federal employee while engaged in or on account of the performance of their official duties, a Class A misdemeanor punishable by up to 1 year in federal prison. He pleaded not guilty at his first court appearance. Dennis Dale comments, "This is the same guy I recorded here in a video below, threatening to return with a gun after arguing with Patriot protesters on Saturday. As I noted before, he's also in this photo police have released looking for persons of interest related to the Adam Hayner beating." Reviewing the video, we see he's definitely on the street with a group of attackers when the trouble begins. At one point, he seems to be harassing Hayner as he tries to pull away from the 7-Eleven in his truck. I don't see him toward the end, but I have a hard time watching this video. Whatever the case, I'm sure Portland police have already identified this guy. It will be interesting to see what happens. I was struck by how small, Dennis Dale writes, the Antifa kids looked crouching behind their wall of shields placed side by side and resting on the ground as they squared off against their right-wing counterparts on Saturday. It's a defensive posture they take up when police have to clear them from the street. Forcing cops to go heavy, it's as much about promoting police violence as it is about resisting. If the cops fail to clear the ground, it's a win on the ground. If they succeed, it's a win in the agitprop media. The formation also looks a lot more formidable at night, where you don't see the goggles peering and scrawny bodies squatting, just a dark mass. But deploying the wall as their enemy formed up in a column to withdraw was just pointless grandstanding. The little phalanx they formed at the rear of the enemy's column followed along for a few minutes, with the Antifa kids coming up out of their crouch as a group to advance about 10 yards before settling back in, scooting along behind the retreating Patriots as if sweeping them out of town. Despite their chaotic withdrawal, the Patriots managed to hold the street between Antifa and the cops all afternoon, won the handful of fistfights that broke out, and even managed to withdraw their more vulnerable people before navigating a sea of Antifa with a lot of clamor but no injuries or making any criminal mistakes. Portland police arrested a right-winger for firing off a gun as his group escaped a parking garage last August the 15th. A handgun was drawn briefly at the end when the last contingent of less than 10 Patriots were preparing to escape the parking garage. Let's go to the chat. Don from Beyond, KMG, the highlight of my day. Too kind, too kind. David Ray says, Day of the Triffids for KMG. Those flowers are encroaching. I suppose it depends on, I take the camera down off on top of the monitor when I finish the show. And so each time I put it on, I have to, struggle, stand up and sit down and struggle to frame myself best. I'm not particularly well framed today. I'm a little low in the frame. I think that's why the flowers look as if they are encroaching. Chad Chadson, our valiant moderator. Welcome to the Saint KMG stream. I'm no saint. Please be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you, Chad. Calix Rose, where is the FBI? Jonathan Pohl says the rioters in Portland are Stalinists. Well, Portland's got itself into a very difficult position because this has been going on for what, 100 days or so? And Antifa thinks they own Portland, and all the evidence is that they do. I don't know whether the police chief has made any noises about property and his lack of interest thereof, but I wouldn't be surprised. Halper says Hillary hardly campaigned in 2016 either. Seems they expect their press monopoly to do all the work for them. Church of Entropy, still holed up in a hotel? No, I am not in a hotel. I am in a private residence. Yes, Little Stephen. That's the fellow's name who said there was no such thing as the Antifa. Dennis Dale says it's important to spend time with your kids. Yes. Heck McNeck says, okay, Kevin, I finished Come and See. I needed a shower immediately after. I had to go to the credits to make sure it wasn't written by Elie Wiesel and directed by Quentin Tarantino. Remember years ago, back in the 70s, I was off work for some reason, and local TV stations used to show movies in the afternoon. And for some reason, the movie they were playing that day was a Polish movie called Kanal. And it's about the Warsaw Uprising in 1944. And the ending is just are not going to cross the Vistula, and the Germans have trapped the members of the uprising in the sewers and picked off one by one. And the movie ends, and I'm on the couch stunned. They have a bumper at the end of every movie. And that annoying little tune kept playing, and the voice, we hope you did our afternoon movie. And I'm sitting there on the couch, choking, trying to breathe. In the headline, large turnout at Memorial for Huber, who was thrown from a building by a police officer in the Babylon today. When access and see, I believe you can watch it on the Criterion channel. I did well. Agreement with Kevin, says Heck McNeck. This horrible film he had to put up with. Roger Rabbit. The new funeral parlor going came. How much more addition will it take before insurance companies do a blanket denial of claims under the terrorism/acts of war exclusions? Been reading a lot of stories about this. There seems to be a popular view, which the media is obviously has no intention of disputing. Oh, that your gets burned down, or it gets in water. It's whatever, ruined. Contact your friendly insurance company, and they issue you a check for the full amount of damages. Look at Portland. Look at Portland, Kenosha. This is turning out to be a disaster for Democrats. A disaster for Democrats, and they're clearly panicking. Numerous Oh, uprising. Yes. Why isn't there an uprising in the streets of America? Oh, it's just so terrible. Nicole Wallace and the for an uprising. And emboldened, I don't think that these Antifa types, many of them are what career criminals, perverts, ranged. I see them backing off, actually. YT in New Jersey called Lalabad Street. And California blackout guys are now under the light emperor, the light Biden says de Boreas. Yeah. Cowper. Yeah, I have seen Canal. Yeah, that is a very, very overwhelming and sad movie. Actually, the first half of Capo, made by the fellow who made the Battle of Algiers. What's his name? Porticovo. The first half of that movie is devastating. And then it gets sort of goes down a communist rabbit hole in the second half. So, Peter Duffy writes in the Federalist, corporate media didn't report what it's really like in Kenosha, Wisconsin, so I will. Kenosha is in the southern part of the state, about an hour and a half from Chicago. Kyle, who represents Kenosha in Wisconsin's first congressional district, told the Federalist, like cities in Wisconsin, family-centered and hard-working. Kenosha became a very different place after police shot Jay in the back 7 times. Subsequent video footage, Blake was armed with a knife and had been wrestling with a taser and was disregarding police commands to stop after they were called to address a domestic violence complaint. Following the shooting that left Blake paralyzed, rioting erupted in the city. Although the first night was relatively peaceful, after the second night, things were spiraling out of control, said Style. Fire and looting consumed uptown and downtown Kenosha, and Style said the city was no longer the Kenosha we know. In uptown Kenosha on Tuesday night, a woman who said she'd lived there for more than 40 years broke down in tears, saying her city felt like a war zone and she was terrified. The scene on Tuesday night was something I'd only seen in photos of war-torn countries. Men and women stood with baseball bats, handguns, semi-automatic rifles, and shotguns in front of their businesses and homes. Many Canadians explained to me that law enforcement lacked the necessary number of officers to control the situation, forcing them to focus on defending public buildings, such as the courthouse, leaving citizens to fend for themselves. Chuck, who owns an uptown tire shop, said he had been spending every night on his roof guarding his shop with guns. Chuck, who said he is for Trump all the way, was exhausted from several sleepless nights and fed up with his livelihood and life being terrorized by BLM rioters. Chuck glared into my iPhone camera and said to the rioters, "Come to my shop and I'll blow your heads off. I'll even tell you where I'm at," he said, adding, "Come on, boys, I got something for you." Not everyone was as prepared as Chuck. People who did not take their defense into their own hands met a sad fate. Sam, an Indian immigrant who owns a family-run car dealership in downtown Kenosha, lost every dime he has, and the 20 people Sam employed have all lost their jobs for nothing. Sam said his family has been in tears for the last few days. BLM rioters burned his lot 2 nights in a row, destroying all the cars and looting his office before burning that as well. Overwhelmed law enforcement protected the courthouse, but Sam's businesses and many others were left at the mercy of the mob. "I'm a taxpayer," said Sam, clearly distraught that law enforcement did nothing to protect his business. "This is not the America I came into," the shattered man said. "What did we do to deserve all this? I'm a minority too. I'm a brown person. I have nothing to do with this." Sam and his family set up a GoFundMe page, which at this moment has raised a little over $10,000, nowhere close to the over $2 million raised for Blake. After it was clear that law enforcement did not have the resources to protect people like Sam, Style got to work. On Tuesday morning, he said he was able to get through to President Trump within 8 minutes. He told the president that Kenosha was in desperate need of resources and reinforcements. Trump then reached out to Wisconsin Governor Tony Evers, extending him an offer for aid, which Evers refused. And now Evers is telling Trump not to go to Wisconsin, but Trump's going anyway. For 3 nights, Kenosha experienced dangerous rioting. It wasn't until 3 individuals were shot and 2 died that Evers accepted help from President Trump. It's pretty darn clear who demonstrated leadership and who did not sit style. Since federal agents and National Guardsmen were sent to Kenosha, there has been relative peace in the city. The overwhelming consensus among Kenosans is that violent rioters did not come from their city. Kenosha locals did not do this to their town man, said Jason, who came to Kenosha to check on his family. Actually, it appears that most of the people involved were from Kenosha or from nearby, as of course was the American gladiator who shot 2 to death and gravely injured a 3rd. One woman who was working in uptown Kenosha on Wednesday night confirmed out-of-towners came in and rioters in our city. Well, that seems to be the view in Kenosha. One woman who was part of the Love is the Answer movement explained, a lot of people knew a lot of the business owners. I really don't believe that anyone that's been from Kenosha would be willing to watch their city be torn up that way. On Thursday afternoon, I came across a group of young people carrying signs and water out of several vehicles with blacked out license plates near the county courthouse. Among the vehicles was a large black van with the words BLM, ACAB, and the Revolution written on it. They refused to say where they were from. They conceded they are aware Kenosha residents don't want outsiders coming to riot, but this is the earth. It belongs to everybody. I approached the BLM organizers and asked where they were from, but they refused to answer. I also asked if they knew Kenosans didn't want outsiders coming into the city. One of the organizers responded, "Oh yeah, and yes, this is the earth. It belongs to everybody." CNN anchors Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo condemned the violence in Kenosha, Wisconsin on Tuesday because recent polling shows rioting is not being well received by voters. Even though the corporate media is beginning to denounce violent rioting, they still do not seem to care very much for the victims of BLM. Like Sam, by refusing to report their stories, polling in the upcoming weeks will show whether Biden's response was too little and too late, and if support of BLM by the Democratic Party and corporate media is out of step with average Americans. Unequivocal support may prove to be a politically untenable position of Democrats if riots begin to erode support from key demographics such as suburban moms, blue-collar workers, and Black inner-city voters who live in the areas most devastated by BLM riots and lack of police protection. Okay. Oh, yes, in defense of looting. How about that? It's come to this. This is written by a person called Vicky Osterweil. And I believe that Vicky was wrongly identified at birth. I'm trying to use the correct language. In 2017, this person wrote an essay called Force-Fed, How Recommendation Algorithms Tried to Make Me a Nazi. Can you imagine? Until recently, I was heavily addicted to the multiplayer, a computer game, Dota 2. Gamer, huh? There's a shocker. A thriving esport with a massive community that produces an enormous amount of online content to interact with. On YouTube, there is a plethora of guides, matches, and memes, and I spent a good amount of my waking hours there. But for the past few months, along with the latest Dota memes, YouTube has been putting a variety of hyper-misogynist neo-Nazi movement content in my recommended for you column, $1 Million Extreme. That's Sam Hyde and friends. Pickup artist videos, Milo Greek name, and more, despite my having only ever used YouTube for Dota videos and non-fascist music. A long, deep engagement with a particular branch of gaming has led YouTube to assume that I'm an alt-right F-boy, or at least might want to be. Oh dear, oh dear. Yes. One author's defense argument in defense of looting from Code Switch. In the past months of demonstrations for Black Lives, oh, is that what the demonstrations are for? There's been a lot of hand-wringing about looting. whether it was New York Governor Andrew Cuomo saying that stealing purses and sneakers from high-end stores in Manhattan was inexcusable, or St. Paul, Minnesota Mayor Melvin Carter saying looters were destroying our community. Police officers, government officials, and pundits alike have bemoaned the property damage and demanded an end to the riots. And just last week, rioters have burned buildings and looted stores in Kenosha following the police shooting of Jacob Blake, to which Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican, has said peaceful protesting is a constitutionally protected form of free speech. Rioting is not. Writer Vicky Osterwald's book in defense of looting came out on Tuesday. When she finished it back in April, she wrote rather presciently that a new energy of resistance is building across the country. Now, as protests and riots continue to grip cities, she argues that looting is a powerful tool to bring about real, lasting change in society. The rioters who smash windows and take items from stores, she says, are engaging in a powerful tactic that questions the justice of law and order and the distribution of property and wealth in an unequal society. I spoke with Osterwell about this summer's riots, the common narrative surrounding looting, and why nonviolence can be a misleading term. Let's see, how do you define looting? Osterwell was asked. When I use the word looting, I mean the mass expropriation of property, mass shoplifting during a moment of upheaval or riot. That's the thing I'm defending. I'm not defending any situation in which property is stolen by force. And of course, a mob could not possibly be defined as force. It's not a home invasion either. It's about a certain kind of action that's taken during protests and riots. Looting is a highly racialized word. Boo groan hiss. From its very inception in the English language, it's taken from Hindi, lut, which means goods or spoils, and it appears in an English colonial officer's handbook in the 19th century. And the importance of that is, by the way, can you talk about rioting as a tactic? What are the reasons people deploy it as a strategy? It does a number of important things. It gets people what they need for free immediately, which means that they are capable of living and reproducing their lives without having to rely on jobs or a wage, which during COVID times is widely unreliable, or particularly in these communities is often not available. Or it comes at great risk. That's looting's most basic tactical power as a political mode of action. It also attacks the very way in which food and things are distributed. It attacks the idea of property, and it attacks the idea that in order for someone to have a roof over their head or have a meal ticket, they have to work for a boss in order to buy things that people just like them somewhere else in the world had to make under the same conditions. It points to the way in which that's unjust. And the reason that the world is organized that way, obviously, is for the profit of the people who own the stores and the factories. So you get to the heart of that property relation and demonstrate that without police and without state oppression, we can have things for free. This is obviously lunacy, but that Overton window keeps shifting on the left. So how is football holding up? NFL football. Well, they decided to surrender to Black Lives Matter. They're not selling football so much as they're selling Black Lives Matter. Vox Day quotes from Peter King: "A player, if he chooses, can have the name of a black person wronged in a confrontation with police emblazoned on the back of his helmet. End zones will have 'it takes all of us' on one end line and racism on the other. Coaches and game officials will be able to wear patches on their cap with the name of a black victim or with one of four messages: 'It takes all of us,' 'Black Lives Matter,' and racism, 'Stop hate.' As for the helmets, players can choose either a black name or one of four preferred phrases offered: 'Stop hate,' 'It takes all of us,' and racism, 'Black Lives Matter.'" Vox King comments, "Embracing this social justice cause should totally help with all those soon-to-be former fans who were infuriated by the league and the teams kowtowing before the anthem kneelers." Or should that be anthem kneelers? King says, "We're in a different sporting world. And for all those who want people in the NFL to stick to sports, you're going to have to watch and listen to a different game this year. They got to the point of actually issuing orders now. You are going to have to watch. We are going to shovel the paws down your throat, and you have no alternative. Vox Day concludes, they're going to have to watch. Want to bet? I can only speak for myself, but I'm out. Jim Kussler's column today, he has come out officially as a supporter of Donald Trump. If you've read Kussler's columns over the years, you know that he was not an admirer of Donald Trump for most of the usual reasons, well, those relating to vulgarity, say, and big-headedness. But he writes this morning, the few times this COVID-19 year of seclusion that friends have come over for dinner, they're horrified to hear me say that I will do whatever I can to prevent the Democrats from winning the election. I was never a big thumper for Donald Trump and didn't vote for him in 2016 or Hillary, but I will this time. I'm in favor of his policy standing for defending the U.S. border and stopping the flow of illegal migrants, on ending our foolish misadventures in foreign lands, on reducing the government's stranglehold on private enterprise, and on opposing the matrix of rackets that make up the D.C. swamp. I admired Trump's resilience in the face of a relentless assault by the intel community, the D.C. cabal of lawfare seditionists, and the despicable confabulations of the New York Times and other media voices of authority captive to the left. I still view Trump as the designated bag holder for the catastrophe of our economic quandary, but his political opponents would surely make things worse with their crypto-Marxist fantasies of a totalist American nanny state. Few in any quarter of U.S. leadership understand the long emergency we've entered, and most who do are too timid to spell out what it will actually require of us in the way of rigor and fortitude. But here is my bill of particulars against the Democratic Party and what it has come to represent in recent years. And I write, Kussler notes, as someone who has remained a registered Democrat since 1972. When their basic philosophy is not incoherent, it presents as explicit hypocrisy and bad faith. For instance, their Orwellian insistence on shutting down free speech in the name of diversity and inclusion. This malignant jive has just about destroyed higher education across the land, but it has also managed to infect business, government, and the arts and turn the general population into cowering hostages willing to lie about their convictions to avoid cancellation. The key to understanding the democratic progressive ethos is this: the drive for coercion, the wish to push everybody around to tell them how to think and what to do. There is an evil purity about the pleasure they appear to take in it, like children who enjoy tearing the wings off flies. They'd like to see their enemies squirm and plead in torment before cancellation makes them disappear from the scene. They like to extract confessions and apologies, not for the sake of redemption, but as grounds for further persecution. In short, they're sadists. They seek to erase every boundary of behavior that makes civilized life possible and overtly campaign to overthrow science and reason in the name of a new and improved form of racism. Math, history, and literature are too hard because they are products of white supremacy. Better get rid of all that. And while you're at it, cancel white people on the basis of their sheer whiteness. Relations between men and women are not difficult enough. Better gin up a campaign of grievance and resentment against men, disable them wherever possible, and militate against masculinity per se, turning America into a nation of pliable eunuchs. Under their banner, anything goes and nothing matters. Violent anarchy is mostly peaceful. Looting is a form of joyful liberation. Anybody's property is just their free stuff. What's mine is mine, and what's yours is mine. Crime is the new entitlement. Self-defense is insulting to mobs. Thugs with long rap sheets are exemplars of virtue and must be honored in violent rituals of civic destruction. Those are general principles. At the official level, since 2016, they've played out in a set of pernicious campaigns against the public interest and common decency by the self-proclaimed resistance. Russiagate was, in the strict sense of the word, a conspiracy to overthrow a president carried out by a coordinated effort of high-ranking government employees across many agencies who knew exactly what they were doing. It was an exercise in perfidy, bad faith, and lawlessness run by the very Department of Justice entrusted with enforcing federal law, including attorney Andrew Weissman's cleanup crew, fronted by the dishonorable figurehead Robert Mueller. It remains unresolved due to the tensions in that department and the obdurate resistance of the federal courts. For example, in the 3-year persecution of General Flynn. The eventual day that the hammer comes down on the perps of Russiagate, if it ever does come, will be a moment of historic moral and ethical clarification in this sore beset country. The 2019 impeachment fiasco was a parallel ruse run by Representative Adam Schiff, former Department of Justice lawyer Mary McCord, and lawfare warrior Daniel S. Goldman, with help from resistance intriguers in the National Security Council. I can't mention this fellow's name. And I better not mention the other fellow. And Hillary Clinton's holdover Confederates in the State Department. I say this because I had said this man's name on a previous YouTube live stream, and it was instant shutdown. Okay, this fellow's pretense to be acting as a whistleblower was a nakedly false act, illegally abetted by Intel Community Inspector General Michael Atkinson, himself a former Department of Justice Russiagate lawyer. It is amazing that neither of these two has been indicted for sedition. Add to these matters the associated misdeeds in the FISA courts, the ridiculous, scurrilous charges against Supreme Court Justice nominee Brett Kavanaugh by the mendacious Christine Blasey Ford, the ongoing schemes of House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Senate Minority Leader Charles Schumer to rig the vote with unverifiable mail-in ballots, and the wholesale acts against the public interest by Democratic mayors and governors such as Ted Wheeler, Kate Brown, Bill de Blasio, Andrew Cuomo, Lori Lightfoot, J.B. Pritzker, Ralph Northam, Jacob Fry, Tim Walz, Muriel Bowser, Eric Garcetti, Gavin Newsom, Tony Evers, and a wider rogues gallery of other Democratic subalterns such as Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison and New York City Education Chancellor Richard Carranza. And you have a nearly complete picture of this odious faction. Finally, add the cherry picture of this odious faction. Finally, add the cherry on top. Democratic candidate for President Joe Biden. Does anybody still believe that he is a plausible chief executive, even in his own degenerate party? I doubt it. Why they engineered his nomination may remain one of the great mysteries of human existence, except perhaps to speculate that their sadism has turned inward and become a suicidal death wish. They're finally so miserably contemptible that they just want to end it all. Personally, I don't want to see any of these people anywhere near the levers of power in this country. Quite a few of them deserve to be in jail, and I believe before Trump's second term is up, they will be, if they don't try to wreck the United States altogether with new treasons in the November election. I'm against them heart and soul, and I no longer care what my old friends think about it. Well, that certainly couldn't be any more clear. And of course, the fear that the Democrats have is that a lot of people who would have not, they wouldn't even consider voting for Trump for all sorts of reasons, are now seriously considering. And in fact, there's been quite a few stories that I've read recently indicating that people are just coming out and saying it, that the Democratic Party is the party of anarchy, of winking and nodding at the destruction of America's cities. Nicholas Stix has an interesting piece in VDare called, Yes, Virginia Dare, Black Supremacism Really Is a Thing. Throughout the 16 years I've been writing for VDare, editor Peter Brimelow has routinely struck out my references to black supremacism. His rationale, readers wouldn't understand the term, and it seemed a rather grandiose explanation for black behavior. But Paul Kersey agreed with me, and Steve Saylor got away with calling it black megalomania. Now with the Black Lives Matter blood libel against white America literally running riot, Peter has given up. So here I finally get to explain that black supremacism really is a thing. Part of our disagreement was certainly due to the fact that Peter grew up culturally deprived in England, whereas I'm a kid from New York City's vibrant outer boroughs. In late 1972, during my brief tenure as a token white in a small, vibrant, and, well, black street gang, led by Alan Poncho Hankins, one member, John Henry White, once told me, "All the white people gon' die. Even me, even you, Sticks." When Poncho began telling me, "You are slave," cheating me out of shoplifting proceeds and telling me that he and John Henry were going to inflict me with horrible beatings, I ran away. When I participated as a token white in the initially black nationalist federally funded youth justice program, 1974 to 1976, I survived occasional murder attempts by kids whose names I still remember: Ricky Booker, Bo Diddley, Johnny Wilson. In year 2 of the YJP, all participants were given copies of the Sam Greenlee novel, The Spook Who Sat by the Door. Greenlee, who was born in 1930 and died in 2014, was the first affirmative action hire into the U.S. Information Agency. Spook is an unreadable fantasy in which the first black CIA agent, Freeman, crisscrosses the country, organizing black street gangs in order to overthrow the U.S. government and annihilate all whites. When the YJP's youth workers sought to engage the participants in conversation about Spook, I was the only participant who spoke. I believe that was because I was the only participant who had opened the book. My chief complaint, how terribly it was written. The youth workers considered Spook not only great literature, but a realistic plan for action. The YJP was funded by the federal Nixon administration Law Enforcement Assistance Administration via the 1970 Safe Streets Act and was administered by the Nassau County Economic Opportunity Commission. As James Q. Wilson would later observe, public officials in those days really thought that they could co-opt street fighters. At the time, John Kearse ran the EOC. Numerous black women who worked in the EOC's daycare racket as preschool teachers complained publicly that Kearse forced them to kick back a portion of their pay to him. Nassau County's longtime conservative pro-life and allegedly law and order Republican DA Dennis Dillon said he'd investigate the matter but dropped it, and Kearse died without being prosecuted, let alone imprisoned. And then he goes on to talk about how Danny McWilliams, who became famous for raising the American flag over the smoking ruins of the World Trade Center, and in 2017, Cecilia Loving, the New York City Fire Department's chief diversity and inclusion officer, barred him from holding the flag in a color guard during a memorial mass to honor deceased black firefighters. And not discrimination, she said. Not at all. Of course, the black supremacist tradition has existed in African American culture long before BLM or even before Eldridge Cleaver, Minister of Information for the Black Panthers, who famously wrote in his book Soul on Ice that he regarded raping white woman as, quote, an insurrectionary act, unquote. He talks about Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, and how this movement, the civil rights movement, was rife with communists. The integrationist civil rights movement was dominated by and served a more educated, middle-class, light-skinned African-American elite and worked through the courts and lawmakers. In contrast, the separatist black nationalist movements were dominated by and served a more dark-skinned, uneducated, violent urban constituency. They've even worked through taking over prisons from the inside. He writes about Marcus Garvey, the Back to Africa man, riding in a carriage, I think in Harlem, wearing this absurd get-up, military get-up with a plumed hat, no less. Garvey led the largest black movement in American history, partisan sources say as many as 4 million strong, and founded the Back to Africa movement and a steamship company, the Black Star Line. In 1920, he was charged with criminal libel and later mail fraud for his Black Star fundraising scheme. He probably would have gotten off had he had not been so vain as to insist on acting as his own attorney. He was convicted and deported home to Jamaica in 1927. And he talks about the Nation of Islam and the strange man called Wallace Dodd Ford, who appears to have been a white man from New Zealand. But he used many different names. The latest incarnation of the Black supremacist movement is, of course, Black Lives Matter, a full-on Marxist operation that even uses the communist clenched fist logo, albeit a black clenched fist. It is organized around a few general, if unstated, principles that will eventually justify the mass murder of whites. For example, thanks to greater melanin content, every black is superior to all whites in every way, morally, intellectually, physically, aesthetically, culturally, etc. Blacks must have their own system of laws and rules, civil rights laws, hate crime laws, and affirmative action rules that supersede the laws and rules which normal whites must obey. This system must be continuously enforced, reinforced, and expanded. I wrote this over 10 years before Christopher Caldwell. Whites who have not broken any laws must be arrested simply because they're white. See the Duke rape hoax and the Gina hoax. Blacks must take back what they're owed. Looting is reparations. All symbols of white oppression, like statues of white heroes, must be destroyed. Blacks need not obey the white man's law or even simple rules that govern, say, cheating in school. Blacks need not obey or respect any white authority figure, and whites must show deference to blacks. Thus, the kneeling of whites, particularly white Eloy women, before black thugs. Every white for all time is responsible for any single injustice ever committed by any white against any black. Conversely, no black is responsible for any injustices ever committed by any black against any white. I believe it's a short step from this unofficial yet ruthlessly enforced black supremacist orthodoxy to exterminating whites who frustrate black ambitions, whatever those ambitions might be. Kuhn, in his Structure of Scientific Revolutions, postulated that scientific opinion does not change because people are persuaded. It changes because these people, the old guard, dies. I think it's a general principle. And the boomers are beginning to die out. And soon, it will be a rush of boomer deaths. Of course, the boomers were introduced to exceedingly liberal views about race, and most of them like to look back to the 1960s and claim to have, played some sort of part in the civil rights revolution, if only by watching it on television and tearing up. But these people are dying off. And I think that the younger generations have rather different views. They lack the sentimentality of the boomers. From the Daily Mail, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? You don't. You've just identified yourself with the terms radical socialist and soft spot for rioters. This is Joe Biden, of course. He slams Donald Trump for linking him to violence and accuses president of poisoning our very democracy in Pittsburgh speech denouncing rivals' leadership. He can't stop the violence because for years he has fomented it. Okay. This is the same speech at which he completely mangled his kill shot regarding COVID. Joe Biden delivered pizza to firefighters in Pittsburgh after he delivered a speech there. He's wearing a mask outdoors because, of course, he is. I saw the new leader of Canada's Conservative Party, Aaron O'Toole. He's a man, not a woman, despite his name, wearing a mask, rather serious looking one, outdoors. It just shows weakness and also, stupidity. Oh, yes. The thing about cultural appropriation, of course, again from the Mail. She grew up in black culture. She's from Tottenham. Adele, who is a singer, is defended by Naomi Campbell, Alexandra Burke, and MP David Lammy after being accused of cultural appropriation for wearing a Jamaican flag bikini and Bantu knots. Some slam this as insensitive. Some people claim the Rolling in the Deep singer was profiting off black culture. Yes, she grew up in Tottenham, London, and has been surrounded by black culture throughout her life. Naomi Campbell, whose mother was born in Jamaica, commented on Adele's photo with 2 love heart emojis and 2 pictures of the Jamaican flag. David Lammy, member of parliament for Tottenham, tweeted, Adele was born and raised in Tottenham. She gets it more than most. Forget the haters. Others said she wanted to show off her epic weight loss and was not offensive. It's not a good look. It's not a good look, and frankly, using the flag of one's own country or another country as a bikini is it's disrespectful and insulting. But this is supermodel Naomi Campbell. How old is Naomi Campbell now? She's not a supermodel and has been a supermodel for many, many, many years. But we have to call her one for some reason. Oh, okay. I'm going to talk about George Soros, but I'm going to go to the chat first. Let's see. Kevin didn't even mention the man's name. He just hinted at it, and then whammo, the bots just went nuts. That's spooky. Let's see. You were also special because you love feminism. Oh, okay. Feminism is female chauvinism. What's to love? Beyonce never did that. Well, yeah, I guess not. Okay, something went on in the chat here. The Dukes of Hazzard disrespected your Confederate flag. My Confederate flag? Oh, I see. We have someone in the chat who is calling me a Nazi. Well, okay, remove that. And okay, let me go to this. Okay, all right. Hidden now. Would I ever think of spending time at an Antifa website? No, I ignore them. The General Lee must pay, says Brandon Smith. Okay. Okay, all right. Let's see. Oh, we have another troll. Wow, another troll. Okay, I'm gonna deal with this person. Okay, there we go. Oh, let's see. And we have what, a bunch of comments in what, Sanskrit? Oh, okay. So the chat has been okay. I think I've dealt with these people. Okay. Let's see. Let's talk about George Soros. He can't be criticized, it seems. Not in Canada. Because that would be anti-Semitic. Which I don't know how you end up there. But this is a man who is well, he's 90 years old now, and he resembles a Bond villain more than anything else. Let's see. According to Wikipedia, he's known as the man who broke the Bank of England because of a short sale of 10 billion US dollars worth of pounds sterling, which made him a profit of $1 billion during the 1992 Black Wednesday UK currency crisis. Oh, and let's see. Does it mention here? How he destroyed the economies of Asian countries? Did I mention that? But yes, and he funds color-coded revolutions. And what is he? American citizen. I suspect he has citizenship of several countries. He's originally from Hungary, of course, and there was a university associated with him, led by a former leader of the Canadian Liberal Party, Michael Ignatieff, who had spent most of his adult life living in the United States and Britain. Amusingly, he was far better known when he became leader of the Liberal Party of Canada. He was far better known in Britain than he was in Canada, but they had to flee across the border to Austria because the current government in Hungary, led by Viktor Orban, is not putting up with this nonsense. Of course, Orban himself, I believe, once received aid from George Soros. Oh, my personal opinion is there's no alternative but to give Kosovo independence. He's helped fund a non-profit group called Independent Diplomat. It represented Kosovo, the Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, Somaliland, and the Polisario Front of Western Sahara. Oh, he's funded worldwide efforts to promote drug policy reform. Of course he has. Of course he has. Okay. The Project on Death in America, active from 1994 to 2003, was part of the Open Society Institute's project, which sought to understand and transform the culture and experience of dying and bereavement. In 1994, Soros delivered a speech in which he reported he'd offered to help his mother, a member of the Right to Die advocacy organization Hemlock Society, commit suicide. But now a Canadian Conservative MP is in big trouble for being mean to George Soros. This is from CTV News. Anti-hate groups and Jewish associations say a now-deleted tweet from longtime Conservative MP Kerry Lynn Finlay spread potentially dangerous anti-Semitic conspiracy theories. Over the weekend, Finlay retweeted a video clip of a 2009 interview that then journalist Chrystia Friedland conducted with billionaire investor George Soros for the Financial Times. Finlay commented in a retweet that the closeness of these two should alarm every Canadian, a sentiment that was retweeted by fellow conservative finance critic Pierre Poilievre. The tweet was seen by many as a far-right dog whistle. She was actually retweeting one of the hard-right conspiracy theorists who has these dark anti-Semitic images of George Soros. Bernie Farber of the Canadian Anti-Hate Network explained to CTV News. Soros, a Holocaust survivor, has donated billions of dollars to progressive political causes, a gesture twisted by far-right groups, making the accusations that the 90-year-old is trying to control the world. Keep in mind that this is allegedly a news story and not an opinion column. I do not believe that Ms. Finlay's intent was anti-Semitic, but it's important also to know that even without intent, the effect can be anti-Semitic. Richard Marceau with the Center for Israel and Jewish Affairs in Ottawa told CTV News. The 2-minute clip shows Soros answering a question on how then U.S. President Barack Obama should approach financial relations with China. Finlay commented in her Saturday post that Freeland, during Soros's answer, was listening like student to teacher. Anytime these anti-Jewish conspiracy theories are promulgated, they put Jews at greater risk, Farber said. What are they saying here? George Soros cannot be criticized. He cannot be criticized because he's a Jew. It's that simple. Oh, yes, he's fabulously rich, and he meddles in the politics of the entire world, but no. You can't say anything against that, because this would be playing up to a horrible conspiracy theory. No, actually it isn't. George Soros is one man. He does not represent all Jews. And to make this argument is preposterous and insulting. But wait for it. Finlay has apologized for the tweet. She deleted it Saturday afternoon after the backlash. Earlier today, I thoughtlessly shared content from what I'm now learning is a source that promotes hateful conspiracy theories. She added that she apologized to anyone who thinks I would want to endorse hateful rhetoric. The apology did not address her own comment on the video itself, although she's apologized as a potential challenge for new conservative leader Erin O'Toole, who, despite the name, is actually a man, who in his acceptance speech a week ago promised an inclusive conservative party. If an MP does something that they have to apologize for, then all eyes go to the leader and say, what are you going to do about that? Laurie Turnbull, a political science professor at Dalhousie University, pointed out to CTV News. So far, O'Toole has remained silent, not making himself available Sunday for interviews. His spokesperson says that he has nothing more to add. They're already on at O'Toole because he refused to say whether he believed that Canada was possessed by systemic racism, whatever that might mean? The commissioner of the RCMP, who is a woman, got into very, very serious problems because she denied the systemic racism accusation. And yeah, she was made to grovel as well. There are now, 1.2 million Black people in Canada. As of 1971, there were 34,400. So this is not natural increase, it's immigration, primarily from Jamaica and Haiti, but now increasingly from Africa itself. Now, if Canada is a country which is, so scarred by systemic racism, why did these people come here in the first place? Or why did their parents come here in the first place? It's obvious, because Canada is a far, far better place than the shitholes they came from. But now, of course, Canada is wicked. It always has been wicked. I don't know. How about that? They're given $75,000 to go home. How about that? I'm sure they have talents which their home countries could benefit from. I don't know. I think such a policy would pay for itself, actually. So is the chat still on fire? Systemic and systematic get into a street fight. Who wins? Says Chogokin 666. We're well underway to creating our own Black racial problem. Congratulations to us, says Alex DeLarge. Well, no, this is after some Blacks got into a little melee with some cars on Yonge Street in Toronto back in the 90s. There was a almost orgasmic response from Canada's elite. Canada finally has its own Black race problem. Now, what can you say about leaders who would deliberately engineer this? Because that's what they have. And they're playing along now with, Canada is wicked and Canada has always been wicked. This is very dangerous. They don't understand. They're stupid and arrogant. But I'll repeat what I've said in the past. Canadian patriotism has been so denigrated that in the future, let's say, i.e. now, if the government asks for sacrifices from Canadians, it is not going to get them. Because why would anyone want to make sacrifices for a country that's wicked and has always been wicked? The people who are pushing that Canada is wicked and always has been line should remember that Mikhail Gorbachev became leader of the Soviet Union in 1985, and with his glasnost engineered a similar situation in the Soviet Union, with the result that 6 years later it was gone, officially vanished. Because why would you defend a country that was wicked and was always wicked? Let's see. Okay. What else do we have here? He's literally training a new elite in East Europe and Central Asia. That would be George Soros. Well, he's not doing it in Hungary anymore. Alex DeLarge, George Soros founded Central Asian University too. Chad Chadson makes a comment about Soros's activities in Budapest in 1945. I don't really want to go into that. I'll just say this. I've never been put in that situation. I don't think there's anyone who listens to this live stream who's been put into the same situation that George Soros was in 1945. And I know a lot of people have decided to execrate him for that. I'm not going to do so. There's plenty of other things that one could complain about with regard to George Soros. His name is a palindrome. Yeah, seriously. Palindrome was chosen correctly for that reason. It's very strange. His father was a crusader for Esperanto. Yeah, really. Now, this is a significant story, and look, the pandemic has petered out. Okay. It's not cholera, said Bloomberg over the weekend. When are the people in the MSN going to start apologizing, making groveling apologies for scaring us all to death, for smashing the economy, wrecking society, and erasing civil liberties? Oh, yeah, we're not going to get any apologies, are we? From the Daily Mail. The Centers for Disease Control says 94% of all Americans who have died of COVID-19 had at least one other underlying disease. More than 180,000 Americans have died of coronavirus as of Monday. No, actually, 180,000 Americans with COVID-19 have died as of Monday. The CDC's latest fatality data shows that COVID-19 was listed as the sole cause of death for just 6% of those killed by the virus. 94% of fatalities were in people who also suffered at least one chronic health condition, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity, or heart disease. On average, people who died of coronavirus had 2.6 additional underlying health conditions. And again, this explains why COVID-19 is allegedly a racist virus. Among death certificates submitted to the CDC, just 9,683 listed COVID-19 alone as the cause of death. It became clear early on in the pandemic that elderly people and those with underlying chronic health conditions were most vulnerable to catching and getting severely ill with coronavirus. As the case with most infectious diseases, people in these vulnerable populations tend to have weaker immune systems, which makes it harder for the bodies to fight off infection. Many, especially those who are obese or have high blood pressure, also have higher levels of baseline inflammation. Oh, yes, it's funny. This is taking a rather different line because we were all going to die. And young people going to the park, going to the beach, going to the pub, they were going to kill us all. In fact, people are still saying that, actually. This is from the Express, the London Express. Chaos erupts in Germany as hundreds storm the Reichstag building in huge anti-corona protest. Shocking footage captured the moment hundreds of German protesters tried to storm the historic Reichstag. Police barricades were overwhelmed by the furious protesters who were demonstrating against the German government's COVID-19 protection measures. A violent confrontation with police at the German parliament broke out after a day-long rally, which drew nearly 40,000 protesters to the Berlin streets. Similar protests also erupted across European capitals in London, Paris, and Zurich, although these rallies were smaller in size. Some of those in social media footage can be seen waving the flag of the German Reich of 1871 to 19 and other symbols of the far right. What does the BBC have to say? Demonstrators, many with far right sympathies. Yes, apparently to be against the erasure of civil liberties now means that you have far right sympathies. Some 38,000 turned out for the largely peaceful Berlin demonstration. Demonstrators bearing the flag of former Imperial Germany, used by the Reichsbürger, Reich Citizens far right group, overcame a handful of police to run to the entrance of the Reichstag building in Berlin. I suppose it's only a matter of time, if it hasn't happened already, that those Canadians, such as myself, who prefer the old red ensign flag, which was replaced by a maple leaf by Lester Pearson, in 1965, that we will be accused of far-right sympathies. In fact, actually, now that I recall, something that former boss of mine at BC Report, railing against, these people with their red ensigns. But swings and roundabouts. From the Associated Press. What happens when pandemic locks down a globe-trotting pope? Yes, we're not hearing much these days from anti-Pope Francis. On the March day that Italy recorded its single biggest jump in coronavirus fatalities, Pope Francis emerged from lockdown to offer an extraordinary prayer and plea to his flock to reassess their priorities, arguing the virus had proved they needed one another. Francis's words from the rain-slicked promenade of St. Peter's Basilica encapsulated the core messages he has emphasized during his 7-year pontificate: solidarity, social justice, and care for the most vulnerable. But the dramatic moment also underscored how isolated the Pope had become during the COVID-19 emergency and a sustained season of opposition from his conservative critics. Don't you mean far right? He was utterly alone before an invisible enemy preaching to a hauntingly empty piazza. During the virus crisis, Francis has become a 21st century prisoner of the Vatican, as one of his predecessors, that would be Pius IX, was once known, robbed of the crowds, foreign travel, and visits to the peripheries that so defined and popularized his papacy. Oh, is he really a popular figure? He will resume physical contact with his flock next week with revived Wednesday general audiences, but the meetings will be held in an internal Vatican courtyard before a limited crowd rather than the vast St. Peter's Square. Yes, well, that is as it should be. As Obermois said, if you want bouillabaisse, you go to the south of France, and if you want to see the Pope, you go to Rome. Hey, what about, aren't we all worried about carbon footprints? Don't we have Zoom technology and the like? Bedwetters, that's what Toby Young calls the people who are engineering the hysteria about COVID-19. This is from Friday from the Chicago Tribune, and I could scarcely believe it when I saw it, but that's the kind of year 2020 has been. 6 months into the pandemic, there is talk of re-examining the 6 feet social distancing guideline. Oh, so it only has to be 3 feet, say? No. The British Medical Journal released a report last week arguing 6 feet is only a minimum for safe social distancing. Instead of one official distance, researchers suggested a graded recommendation, depending on factors including whether someone is singing versus talking or interacting outdoors or indoors. Dr. Emily Landon, Executive Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control at the University of Chicago Medicine, what? So the paper could be a helpful resource. I think that this is a great chart that sort of gives you an understanding of why we have to keep the 6 feet rule. She explained that COVID-19 is a virus spread through droplets which don't usually travel past 6 feet. Although it is detected in aerosols like coughing or sneezing, it's still unclear how much transmission is driven by those methods. Researchers created a chart within the report by which people can gauge the level of risk for indoor or outdoor gatherings and whether someone is wearing a mask. Dr. Michael Lynn, an infectious disease specialist at Russ University Medical Center, said the chart may not be easy for regular people to follow since it's already difficult to get people to stick to masks, distancing, and hand washing. I think it's well-meaning but overly complicated, and in public health there's a real imperative to be clear on communication. You mean like saying that masks are useless and then saying, oh no, everyone, masks are great and they should be worn at all times? That kind of confusion with the World Health Organization saying, COVID-19, it's not much to worry about. It's xenophobia that we need to be frightened of. Yeah, that kind of confusion. A piece from the Toronto Star by Katie Dobbs. You can call them cynical spreaders, but the COVID-19 flouters are following a trail blazed in debates over vaccines, milk safety, and seat belts. Yeah, cynical spreaders. Are they spreading it? Really? People, there's a lot more cases, more and more cases, but the number of people in hospital in Canada is tiny. It's tiny. But it's the purpose of this story to let us know that these lunatics have always been among us. And pasteurized milk. Oh yes, it was once controversial. In fact, it was the European Union that forced no less than the Queen of England to switch milk. The cows on her farmland were regularly tested for tuberculosis, but the European Union insisted that the Queen's milk must be pasteurized. Yeah, cynical spreaders. How about people who are not panic-stricken? People who are not snitches and sneaks? I'm feeling a kind of watershed about COVID-19, that it's going to be very difficult for the tyrants who are in power to keep this panic going. Toby Young writes, the UK's second wave is a costly myth. And there's a picture of Matt Hancock, who is really a stupid-looking man. Will Jones has an excellent piece in The Conservative Woman about Matt Hancock's mysterious obsession with a second wave. Go second wave! And the ruinously expensive steps the government is taking to prepare for this non-existent threat. Here's his conclusion. A lockdown that was brought in without precedent or planning for 3 weeks to squash the sombrero and relieve peak pressure on the NHS is still going on 5 months later. We face a future of continued social distancing and unpredictable new restrictions that are socially debilitating and economically disastrous. Even the much vaunted vaccine is very unlikely to do more than mitigate the impact of the illness, making it a likely false dawn for those waiting around for it. Yet the World Health Organization continues to call on governments to do it all, to suppress the virus, holding up New Zealand as an exemplar. Britain, like Sweden, must reject this preposterous and nihilistic narrative. It's not possible to suppress this virus, as New Zealand is now discovering, but only to mitigate its impact while developing collective immunity and ideally returning to normal as quickly as possible. The measures introduced for this mitigation must be balanced against other risks and the high importance of normal, healthy living. Right now, the government does not even seem to be attempting a sensible cost-benefit analysis of its approach, working instead on the basis of a reasonable worst-case scenario derived from discredited models. This is no way to run a country, nor a world. Up to 90% who test positive are not infectious, and this may explain why a rise in cases in countries such as France, Spain, and Italy hasn't produced any corresponding rise in hospitalizations or deaths. Up to 90% of people tested for COVID-19 in Massachusetts, New York, and Nevada in July carried barely any traces of the virus, and it could be because today's tests are too sensitive, experts say. PCR testing, the most widely used diagnostic test for COVID-19 in the US, is too sensitive and needs to be adjusted to rule out people who have insignificant amounts of the virus in their system because they're likely not contagious. Today, the PCR test, which provides a yes or no answer if a patient is infected, doesn't say how much of the virus a patient has in their body. 4 charts showing casademic hasn't led to more deaths. Yeah, it's the media wants clicks, so we're all going to die. Yeah, that's going to get a lot of clicks, but fatigue has set in, has it not? If this was, the disease it was supposed to be, where are all the young dead people? Well, there aren't any, are there? Oh, a handful, a handful. And let's see what Alex Berenson has to say. Oh, he got a PCR test. He has something to say. Somewhere the memos and meeting notes exist. Someone decided to set unrealistic PCR test standards and modeled how many extra cases would be reported. Someone knows how much extra money hospitals have received. Someone has reports of what really happened in nursing homes. Someone has looked at how ventilators damage lungs. Notice you never hear about ground glass opacity anymore. Someone knows why we never ran national randomized antibody tests. Someone has looked at the real comorbidities in deaths under 50, and soon enough, all of us will. Hey, remember how legalizing cannabis was going to help reduce crime? Illinois legalized at the start of 2020. Things are going great. In Chicago, 497 people have been killed this year. That is 145 more than 2019. And Berenson has noticed Joe Biden's inability to speak a single sentence without mangling it. Yeah. These people are not going to apologize because why would anyone take them seriously afterwards? It's like the invasion of Iraq. Remember that? It was going to be a cakewalk. Oh, they just love democracy in Iraq. And they want to be just like Americans. You know, inside every Iraqi, there's an American trying to get out. And yeah, it didn't exactly work out that way, did it? Did these people apologize? Did they say, well, no, I'm not going to be commenting on foreign affairs anymore, or I'm not going to be commenting on anything anymore? No, they did. They just moved on. They just moved on. Peter Hitchens, curiously enough, has been censored by First Things magazine, which is a religious publication that was founded by the late Father Richard House. He says, he writes, for some years I've written occasionally for a thoughtful American magazine called First Things. Last week they asked me to censor what I had written. They said, we are trying to be slightly less critical of the lockdown measures on the site these days, though criticism is of course warranted. So we've made a few changes to the final paragraphs. The First Things board has concerns about some of the pieces we have published on COVID. They have asked us to be less dismissive of COVID-19. Then they asked me to revise what I had written. I said no and have ceased to write for them. It's a sign of the deep damage this panic is doing to Western freedom that the censor's stupid heavy hand should reach even into such gentle places. He argues, Peter Hitchens does, that it's odd that there has been such a fuss over the last night of the proms, removing the words to rule Britannia and land of hope and glory, where something far more serious was ignored. The same people who claim to be exercised about this meekly submit to compulsory masks, house arrest, the suppression of parliament, compulsory family separation, and a catalogue of outrages against our liberty that only a slavish mind would accept. For months, jingoes put up with being treated like cattle or serfs. Then they get cross because of a song. What is wrong with them? A proper patriot knows that what makes us great, above all, is centuries of liberty and a state that is beneath our feet, not over our heads. All they needed to do was to say, we're not putting up with this, as our ancestors so frequently did, but they gave in without a whimper. Is anyone still fooled by these figures for cases of COVID-19? The more you look, the more you will find, but deaths and hospitalizations keep going down. It's increasingly clear that the virus rarely affects healthy people. In fact, I'd guess that the chance of a healthy young person dying from COVID is about as great as the chance of an eagle dropping a tortoise on your head and killing you. This actually happened to the Greek playwright Aeschylus about 2,500 years ago, so it must be about due to happen again, especially with the growing eagle population in the country and the huge number of pet tortoises on which they might swoop if hungry. Be afraid. Using the panic-stricken logic applied to COVID by Health Commissar Matt Hancock, we should surely be taking serious precautions against this menace. Perhaps the enforced wearing of tortoise-proof helmets might be necessary, or anti-eagle netting installed over the back gardens of tortoise owners who should, from now on, be strictly licensed. But my favorite Hancock-style solution is the compulsory greasing of all tortoises so eagles cannot pick them up in the first place. I think this meets the precautionary principle quite well, and I'm sure our domestic grease industry can cope with the demand, save lives, control the tortoise. I'm a little dubious about stories that suggest, even in jest, the next outrage, because yeah, obviously it's absurd, but children have been forced, but children have been forced, and everyone else have been forced to wear bicycles while wear helmets while riding bicycles. But children fall down and smack their heads all the time. And I don't think it would take much of a campaign for various governments, certainly New Zealand would be first in line, forcing all children to wear bicycle helmets at all times, perhaps even in bed. Let's talk about Bella Thorne. I talked about this young actress last week. And I guess what I said was a little misleading, because I was talking about $20 for people to get nude pictures of Bella Thorne. Well, people were paying a lot more. They were paying a lot more than $20, $200, and they weren't naked pictures. So OnlyFans is in very, very serious trouble. This is the sort of thing that we talk about these days. This is from BuzzFeed, because of course it is. Bella Thorne allegedly ruined OnlyFans for sex workers, proving that good things never last. Yeah, sex workers. They're proud of being sex workers, and they're constantly lamenting the discrimination against sex workers. And, some tourist like Bella Thorne decides to be a sex worker. Oh, and she gets sent all this money just because she's famous. I mean, it's outrageous. I mean, it's an insult to all the hardworking sex workers out there. In case you missed it, OnlyFans is a subscription service where fans can subscribe to certain creators for various forms of exclusive content. It can range anywhere from fitness to cooking, but it's particularly popular among sex workers, or people we used to call prostitutes. Especially in quarantine, where strip clubs and other various establishments are closed, this has been a lucrative market for sex workers to get an income on their own terms. Well, in the past couple of months, celebs and influencers have flocked to the app with various promises and varying degrees of success. The most prominent celebrity to do this as of late is none other than Bella Thorne. This week, Bella earned over $2 million, which is a lot. If that were the whole story, this would be a very short article, but alas, it is not. As recently as yesterday, Bella has come under fire for alleged false advertising. People on Twitter are claiming that she charged $200 a pop for nude photos of her. Yes, no clothes. That's what we're promised. Oh, wait. Bella Thorne's Twitter account is "Bitch, I'm Bella Thorne," because of course it is. And no, I'm not doing nudity, she said on August 25th. People have been demanding refunds from OnlyFans. Users and contributors on the platform are drawing a direct correlation between Bella Thorne's posts, the user complaints, and possible new restrictions, like a cap on the amount contributors can charge for their subscriptions, as well as the amount a specific user can tip a creator. Syra Rose tweeted, "Bella Thorne effed over so many sex workers. I'm so sick of celebrities. The entire tipping system just changed and got a huge price cap because she scammed thousands of people. Absolutely ridiculous." And she explained, she scammed people with a $200 PPV, and people are demanding chargebacks. So now you can only charge $50 max for PPV messages, and tipping has been limited to $100. A spokesperson for OnlyFans told BuzzFeed that changes to transaction limits are not based on any one user's. According to OnlyFans content creators, these new rules and caps on payment have cut the income of those who are reliant on the site, and they are rightfully upset. Let's see, Freylu, I don't know how to pronounce this, writes, Due to Bella Thorne scamming her fans in a $200 pay-per-view message, OnlyFans has now introduced these changes to all creators rather than restricting her account. 30-day payout, $100 max tip, $50 max post price. Why we can't have nice things. Oh, let's see. Erica Heidewald, who is described as MD, DDS, PhD, Esquire. I think that may be satirical. Wrote, Bella Thorne is trash for scamming and ruining OnlyFans. OnlyFans is trash for changing policies for everyone instead of banning her. Her subscribers are stupid, and y'all should have just subscribed to actual sex workers and you wouldn't get scammed. I didn't have a high regard for Bella Thorne, but the fact that she has made so many sex workers furious, I'm starting to warm towards this woman. Trader Josephina tweets, my hate for rich people using poor people's modes of income to make themselves richer. YouTube, OnlyFans, Patreon grows so much each day. Oh, I don't know. So maybe this is a great boost for socialism. There was a story on Rolling Stone which just had all of these sex workers just in an absolute fit about Bella Thorne. And it's, I don't know, it's too funny. Oh, wait, update here. Update from Rolling Stone. Bella Thorne apologizes to sex workers after OnlyFans uproar. I wanted to bring attention to the site. The more people on the site, the more likely of a chance to normalize the stigmas. And in trying to do this, I hurt you. Remove the stigma behind sex. What stigma? Sex work. Really? There's a stigma there? Why are these people, openly, telling the world that they're sex workers? Bitch, I'm Bella Thorne, tweeted, remove the stigma behind sex work, and the negativity that surrounds the word sex itself. What color is the sky in her world? By bringing a mainstream face to it, that's what I was trying to do, to bring more faces to the site, to create more revenue for content creators on the site. The fact that you were boasting about having earned $2 million in a week, I suppose that had nothing to do with it. OnlyFans is a subscription platform that allows creators to sell content directly to fans, and since arriving in 2016, has primarily been used by sex workers. Since the COVID-19 pandemic hit the United States in March, it's seen an enormous spike in signups, with Beyonce name-checking it on the Savage remix, and celebrities like Cardi B and Black China joining it as well. Yeah. Cardi B and Black China. Yeah, I would pay money not to see naked pictures of those two women. On social media, however, many sex workers who rely on OnlyFans expressed their discontent. Many worried that the mainstreaming of the platform would oversaturate the market and further marginalize sex workers who rely on it. What? As Rolling Stone previously reported, many sex workers on OnlyFans have raised concern the platform is slowly pushing them out, a claim that OnlyFans has denied. Yes, many sex workers also pointed, yes, this is our moral leaders, sex workers, also pointed to Thorne's comments to the LA Times that she joined OnlyFans to research a role in a new film directed by Sean Baker. Baker went on to deny that he was working on any such project, saying that he and Thorne had only discussed a possible collaboration down the road, and that he advised her team to consult with sex workers and address the way she went about this as to not hurt the sex work industry. In her apology, Thorne emphasized that she never intended to cause any harm to sex workers who rely on OnlyFans, and her decision to join, like the adult film she directed for Pornhub last year, came from a desire to help the stigma behind sex. To help the stigma. She continued, I am a mainstream face, and when you have a voice, a platform, you try to use yours in helping others and advocate for something bigger than yourself. So noble. So noble. Has Bella Thorne really ruined OnlyFans? Here's a picture of Bella Thorne with a ring through her septum, like an animal. Yes, like an ox. Yeah, it would just be a shame. Oh, yeah, Savannah Solo. Let's see. There was no notification, says Savannah Solo, a sex worker and content creator, was in one of the many to tweet about their outrage over the charge. We are now just suddenly unable to receive a tip over $100 and price a pay-per-view over $50. Yes, Savannah Solo. I hope she's enjoying her fame. There's a link to her Twitter account. There's a very awkward photograph of her. That's no, it's a bad photograph. And here she is running around in a one-piece bathing suit, complaining that apparently she gets sent unsolicited dick pics. Oh, taxes. Oh dear. Oh dear. Strangers who are disappointed in me. What? What does that even mean? IRL, in real life friends deciding to subscribe. What you don't, that sounds like you're ashamed. Okay. Let's talk about Sir John A. Mcdonald. A statue of him in Montreal was removed and beheaded. And the CBC is reporting that, yes, he deserved it. The dismantling of a Sir John A. Mcdonald statue. Oh, by the way, the police watched all this. They just stood around watching because that's what they do now. The dismantling of a John A. Mcdonald statue in downtown Montreal is an important act of protest because it does not really physically harm others and makes the point of protest loud and clear, says a University of Prince Edward Island expert. It makes such a strong statement about how the protesters feel about what Canada is currently structured on and what changes need to be made and how we need to reassess our history. Omiyasu Wapasi, an assistant professor in the university's, wait for it, Faculty of Education, told CBC. Now, there are diacritical marks over this fellow's last name, and of course, there are all these Indian languages now, but written forms. The Indians did not have written forms of their languages, so that when you see an increasing number of buildings, institutions, libraries, etc., that are being that have Indian names, they have these crazy diacritical marks all over them. And I would guess that fewer than one Indian in 100 in Canada actually can read this. Let's see. Oh, someone called Nor or Nore, a white trans femme settler in so-called Canada, pronouns they, she. Yeah, in so-called Canada. Okay, fine. Of course, you know, one wonders again why these people simply don't leave. A banner hoisted as the statue was pulled down said, "McDonald has bloody hands for disenfranchising the Asian community and for being one of the architects of the residential school system." Yeah, there's also the reserve system. The founders of Canada made the decision about reserves for Indians because of their belief that in the absence of reserves, the Indians would be completely assimilated and their culture would disappear. Alberta United Conservative Party Premier Jason Kenney responded to the protest action with a series of tweets that read, "The extreme left is responsible for this kind of violence," and that McDonald overcame personal trauma to become Canada's first prime minister. "This vandalism of our history and heroes must stop. It is right to debate his legacy in life, but it is wrong to allow roving bands of thugs to vandalize our history with impunity." City of Montreal workers removed the statue from the ground on Sunday. Let's see, this professor from Prince Edward Island University There's a picture of this woman wearing problem glasses, of course. She wrote her dissertation on how public spaces shape people's understanding of the world they live in today through architecture and symbolism. She is Nahia, which means Cree, and her mother is from Saddle Lake Cree Nation. She's obviously a long way from home then. She said it was particularly interesting for her to see the statue destroyed in this manner, given Mcdonald's influence on the national railway network and shaping Confederation. Most Canadians are very excited about, acknowledge that this created Canada, brought us all together. But at the same time, those railways dispossessed Indigenous people, caused physical harm and death to many Indigenous people. How? Did they get caught on the tracks? As well as people who worked on the railway, including Chinese Canadians. That was their entree into Canada, was working on the CPR. And I suspect it was because the people who built the CPR were too cheap to hire Irish navvies. Canada's first Prime Minister is recognized as a founder of the Northwest Mounted Police, which effectively became the RCMP. The role and responsibility of police forces have been central points of protest across Canada and the world. The academic disputes the idea that colonial pressures have ended, which is why she argues in favor of dismantling and challenging the legacy on which the nation is fundamentally built. As I pointed out previously, federal government of Canada and provincial governments pay a fortune to Indians. And this is because of a sense of guilt, a sense of, feeling that, history's been mean to them, so we're going to make it up in some way. There's no guarantee that these payments will continue forever. And when we have people like this woman, this professor, basically saying that Canada needs to be smashed, dismantled, and all the land given back to the Indians, I suspect that the sympathy for the Indian agenda is going to disappear. Montreal Mayor Valerie Plante said public art and heritage experts will coordinate the statue's restoration. Its future remains uncertain. So there was this manufactured meme over the weekend, Pierre Trudeau, that, why isn't there a statue of Pierre Trudeau in Edmonton? Well, Pierre Trudeau is still hated intensely in Alberta because he deliberately destroyed the oil industry with his national energy policy, leading to many thousands of bankruptcies and ruining the lives of tens of thousands of people. And I remember Pierre Trudeau as well. In 1970, he declared martial law and suspended habeas corpus, and was responsible for hundreds of innocent people being locked up for months. The first election I was eligible to vote for was 1974. And I remember my foster mother was very excited about, me voting, and she asked me who I'd voted for. And I said I spoiled my ballot, and she did not take that well at all. She was angry with me. She asked me why, and I said, well, I would have voted for the Conservative Party, but their leader, Robert Stanfield, has promised wage and price controls, and wage and price controls are idiotic. They don't work. Trudeau had mocked Stanfield for this. What was it, a year later or 2 years later? Trudeau decided to, wait for it, institute wage and price controls. It's like that old joke from 1965, American joke. They told me that if I voted for Goldwater, America would be involved in a land war in Asia. Well, sure enough, I voted for Goldwater, and America got involved in a land war in Asia. So I had a personal reason to hate Pierre Trudeau, which is that retroactively, his anti-inflation board cut my salary by $75 a month and garnished my wages to the tune of, $525, 7 times 75. Now, if you want to put that in terms of 2020 money. We're talking about what, $5,000 or so? Yeah, retroactively reduced my wages and the wages of many, many Canadians. Pierre Trudeau was a tyrant and a thief. Let's have a final look at the chat. Is it quieted down there? There's filthy talk going on here? Okay. What do you have to even be guilty for, KMG? Canada hardly had Indian wars like the USA. That's true. That's true. But the Indian leaders today are increasingly moving towards a position that all Canada belongs to them. Canada, as it exists, really has nothing to do with Indian contributions, nothing at all. Canada was the result of the work of settlers from Quebec and from the British Isles. Okay, you were nothing without stolen goods, says Hidden World. The chat devolved big time, says YT. All right. Oh, okay. A lot of nasty talk in the chat. This is supposed to be, my good taste live stream, Jaakko Roipila says the same with Sami languages in Finland and Scandinavia. The written language was developed by Hungarian linguists who used a ridiculous number of diacritical marks. Okay, that is the show for tonight. And I should mention what's coming up. Theater Thursday, Come and See, 1995 film about the Second World War, which is intense. And on the book club, something a little less intense. It is The Once and Future King by T.H. White. It is an account of the Arthurian legend written as if in modern language, or the language of country aristos. And since in a way, it's funny because it's difficult to attempt to, use old-timey language, but the language that White uses to describe the characters of the Arthurian legend it's pretty much a vanished language itself now. So it gives rather a quaint effect. I will be back on the air tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you would click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you have not already done so. If you would like to contribute to this live stream, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Once again, kevin_grace@hotmail.com. If you're Canadian, you can send money directly through Interac at kevingrace@shaw.ca. And I will leave you with my traditional benediction that in these days of social atomization and civilizational collapse, I do dearly hope that you, my dear viewers and listeners, manage to form some kind of genuine human connection in order to ease the burden. Good night.